And this person walks by and said, "You can't hide from us." Now, there's a whole backstory about his brother being in the CIA, and I don't know if it's true. Okay, I can't vet this for you. But the fact is, that's the theory he gave. So we're at the airport. Now, I'm with the airport with the head of the Orange County MUFON chapter. Okay? And if I stop having a senior moment and remember his name, I'll tell you his name. But I'm sitting at the airport with him, and I'm telling him that this person who was hounding me on the fax and on the phone kept on referring to this IBM computer, the quantum computer, as a reality. And I said, can you imagine that, a computer that actually interacts in time? Well, this person was a physicist, is a physicist at IBM. And it's Jan, but I don't know Jan's last name, Ron. Anyway, so he says to me, "What? How did he know about that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Yeah, IBM has a computer that they're experimenting with that's called the quantum computer. That's the holy grail of computers. It exists now, and that can send messages back in time." And then this person sitting that was on the plane with us turns around, this is in the airport, we're changing planes, and says, "How do you know about that?" He says, "The NSA, when I had my internship with the NSA back in the 1980s, they were working on that." So, I mean, it was kind of like this odd vortex in which everything came together. But I don't know if that answers your question. Yes?
Yeah, I've been to Corso yesterday and today, and it just seems that I listen to him, and I just like, it confuses me. There seems to be a whole body of evidence that is completely discounted by Corso. As if
By whom?
by his father, and it just doesn't exist. We don't have the answer. Is it very possible that they don't have the answer because they've been fooled?
I don't know. I know this. Okay? Here's what I know. That what supported the Corso story, in my mind, was a huge body of notes, a lot of which made no sense on one level because I simply didn't understand them. But it was vetted by a number of people who said, yes, it made sense. And I told a story yesterday about one of the people who had vetted Corso telling me the story of an event that took place ostensibly at Area 51, although it could have been some other place, about this flight simulator that a pilot was invited to walk into, a test pilot. And he walked into the flight simulator. It was kind of like a telephone booth flight simulator. He stood up. And then without his realizing it, he was on the other side of the hangar in an identical flight simulator. And he said, "I quit. Okay? I'm out of here. I'm not going to do this." Now, he didn't know how the flight simulator worked. And the person who was telling me the story didn't know how the flight simulator worked. But what he said was, and this took place ostensibly in the 1990s, that we have material from crashes, from craft, that we absolutely don't know how to use, that it mystifies us. One of the things that the head of Skunk Works, again, his name escapes, Ben Rich, said, the man's name is Jan Harzan, who's the head of Orange County MUFON. Ben Rich said to Jan Harzan, in a room with a bunch of other people, small group, Ben Rich said, "Shh," gathered them around, it's a true story, and said, "We have the technology to send E.T. home." This is Ben Rich, the head of Skunk Works. And the shocking thing was, people said, "Well, how?" And he said, "It means there is an E.T., that we have the technology, we know where E.T. is from, and we can send him home." I know it's not your question.
My question is, and I'm trying to be very specific.
Right,
One of the things that Corso seems to do is to say you have to think this way.
right.
And one of the things that the whole UFO phenomenon says is question your question. In other words, say, I'm not going to
Right.
There are a lot of stuff out there that Colonel Corso, I believe everything he says, forces me to think in only one direction.
And what's that direction?
That direction is that BTs are time travelers, that we sent them back in 1932, that the UFO abduction phenomenon is really not happening, and that I shouldn't even go there because it's negative. That's not what I got here for. That's not what I...
Well, you know what? Then to answer your question bluntly is to say this. What you came here for is what you came here for, and what the facts that you have and that you're digesting are just as real as anything else that anybody else is telling you. I'm not saying you have to think a certain way or not. That there is time travel. I pretty much believe and almost can tell you as a matter of fact that not only does it exist, that our government has been experimenting with it. That time travel is a factor in how the alien craft was navigated and propelled. Whether it was specifically through only remote viewing, I can't tell you that. I know what was in the debris that Colonel Corso had, and I kind of know how the emitters worked and what's been said since and what happened about element 115 and how element 115 stopped a candle from moving at Area 51 when they did the experiment, and they realized that's why the saucer seemed to skip. So I can talk to you about that pretty much because I know that stuff is pretty much true. That's not disinformation. About abductions, you can listen to a variety of people who have absolutely different stories to tell about abductions. John Mack says one thing. David Jacobs says something else. Other people have a completely different view of abductions as somehow something almost holy. The Raelians, Claude Varelian believes that because we were cloned as a species, we were kind of assembled from biological stuff, that hence the aliens, and we are them. Other people at Area 51 have said exactly that. This person, George Hoover, who was the Corso person from the Navy, said the deep, dark secret that at least the Navy knew, and he assumed the other military knew, is that these were not creatures specifically from another planet, and I keep saying per se. They might have had a base there, they might have resided there, but they were essentially us from the future, and that the timeline has been completely corrupted. It's almost as though we went back to the old way, or you went back and said Lincoln should never have been assassinated. And somehow, when John Wilkes Booth got to the unguarded booth at the Ford Theater, you stood in his way, didn't kill him, didn't take the gun away, but somehow blocked him and diverted him, and maybe he killed somebody else. Your presence there changed the timeline. Ostensibly, whether it was Roswell, whether it was Corona years later, whether it was Kingman, Arizona in 1953, changed the timeline. And if you ask me what I believe personally, to answer your question, is that just as there is a multiplicity of timelines, there's a multiplicity of explanations. I really, honestly don't believe any one person has the right answer, because you know why? I don't believe there's a right answer. I mean,
the particle physicists of the moment, and I've read a few of them, I'm no expert, but they seem to believe, and I think most everyone has read anything about particle physics knows this. They believe that the minute you have observed something, it changes.
the Heisenberg uncertainty theory.
And that fits in with everything Mr. Corso has said. To me, it is very, very logical because we change everything through consciousness. What we think about it, how we conceive of it. I mean, this is so basic. I mean, when we look at an oil painting, there are...
Can you hear this? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, could you really bellow?
Well, I am bellowing.
Okay. Stand up, go ahead.